Teachers of Reddit, what is the worst parent conference you've ever had? First IEP meeting. It was a 30-day. Parents never signed last year, so we had 30 days to hold a new one at the start of the year. I was hired 2 weeks after the start of the year, so I had 2 weeks to learn about practical teaching, the ins and outs of the district, learn my students, and adjust to staff. It was a due process case. 15 people in the meeting, multiple lawyers and child advocates, and I haven't even known your kid for 2 weeks and this mom was attacking me. I hate IEP meetings because of this experience. I was an intern, so I wasn't even fully credentialed. This parent was literally arguing over semicolons in the IEP document and wanted 3.6 more minutes of inclusion on collaboration days. I really wanted to say, you're holding your kid back. Stop. I currently have a parent like this. She is insane and looking for a reason to sue the school. Fortunately, my principal and special ed director are smart, tough cookers, and they back the case manager and me 100%. Well, this year I had a parent say in front of their kid that they were too tired to be a parent. They had older kids and were just too tired now. B. You shoulda been too tired to take that dong 10 years ago. A dad brought his 7th grade daughter with him to the conference to get validations on a lie she had told him. I called her out on it, and his response was to reach into his jacket, pull out a thick wooden stick and attempt to strike her with it. I shot my hand out and took the blow, and the pain went down my arm and into the right side of my body. But the girl never even flinched when she was about to get hit. Explained a lot. Taught a 6th grade class where the boy told us, myself, the teacher, and the principal, that his dad told him that he didn't have to listen to me because men don't listen to women. Fast forward to the conference, dad in a room with me, assistant principal and principal, all women, and dad looked the principal in her eyes and confirmed it. He said that he taught him how to be a man and men don't take directions from women ever. That meeting was effectively over at that point. Kid ended up later getting kicked out and sent to an alternative school for reasons that probably could have been corrected had some bozo allowed us to do our job and not limited us to our sex. Another teacher and I had requested a conference for a girl who was flunking largely due to missing work and a ton of absences. The daughter had missed my class that day because she was sick but had checked into school around lunch, so she was the first one to the conference. She was looking pretty green around the gills and I noticed that she had a stamp on her wrist with the name of a local bar club. The more I talked to her, the more I realized she was still pretty hungover. Dad shows up and I could see he was already very angry and frustrated that he has been called in. I liked her, but this kid was a mess in general. She partied hard, slept around, didn't think ahead, and made really stupid choices. She was smart and pretty, but she was silly, had no discipline, and her insecurities had her in a chokehold. I always start and end a conference with the student's strengths to try to sandwich the criticism with positivity. It didn't help. Within minutes he's yelling at her for missing so much school, for being lazy, being no help at the house, and for her bad grades. She started yelling back at him for not trusting her more. She was studying at her friend's last night. It's not her fault she threw up this morning. He was a monster and a mean dad. It was horrible but impressive in scale. The culmination was the two of them full on screaming at each other across the table. You are the reason mom left. No, you are the reason mom left. Apparently, the mom had run off with another woman and moved across the country and left the dad with 5 kids. Start to finish, the conference wasn't longer than 10 minutes and I was sitting there in stunned silence for half of it. Not a teacher, but my mom is. Apparently a student had sent fake emails allowing them to just not come to class sometimes. The parent was shocked. As I'm explaining to the mom why her son got a low grade in 1st grade art, she is sullenly staring at the floor. Meanwhile her 3 other children are tearing apart my room. I had to interrupt myself to ask them to stop several times and she still stood there oblivious and ultimately was confused and in denial by my explanation. Had 2 parents come in. I began talking about their student and they told me they weren't interested in that. They told me that my teaching style didn't work with their student's learning style. They just started talking about all the things their student has complained about and what I should be doing different. They ended by saying that they had 3 more teachers they had to talk to about the same thing. Took everything I had to come from saying if all the teachers are wrong, Maybe it's the student's fault. Was teaching a class of 8-year-olds. I had to prepare them for a year-end concert where every class would perform a song on stage. One of the students insisted that as a Muslim he could not dance, sing or even listen to a song because music was evil, according to his parents. So I had to simply exclude him for every practice with the class, as he would forcibly cover his ears with a pained look on his face whenever a song was played. Bear in mind that he was only 8, so it looked incredibly fake. So I would just make him sit outside class while he sang Islamic songs to himself, trying to drown out our music. It was terribly odd. So parent-teacher meetings roll around and I brought this matter up with his dad. His dad insisted that his son was lying and that they had never discouraged him from music, saying that it was the son's, choice. Sure bro, expecting an 8-year-old to make a decision based on something you said was evil seems legit. The father then tries to patronize me, saying that he will try to bring his son for the concert if he has time. Of course by now I know he's just some weirdo who was trying to indoctrinate his son, so I just wave it off as bulls. For the record, I had 2 Muslim co-workers and some other Muslim students who had no issue with practicing performing the songs. A 15-year-old student of mine acted quite unmotivated during class. She talked to the girl sitting next to her during instructions, never made any class walk in or out of class and responded very rude to any kind of correction. During one class she decided to, very demonstratively, rip one of the exercises I made into tiny little shreds. I asked her to stay after class. She wasn't cooperating whatsoever. In her opinion, there was nothing wrong with her actions. A couple of days later her parents visited school. I collected all her things, including the shredded exercise. I tried to steer the conversation in a concerned but solution-headed direction. I expected her parents to be at least concerned about the situation as well. Instead, they accused me of creating a hostile environment. It was 3 against 1 during the whole conversation. There was absolutely no reason to it. After 30 minutes, I was left feeling completely drained. A couple of days later her mother contacted her daughter's mentor. We had another conversation. In the end, she was allowed a seat near the exit so she could flee whenever I created a hostile atmosphere. She doesn't need a mentor, she needs a therapist. Beginning of the year 2 parents asked to have a quick informal meeting with all their sons' teachers so they can introduce themselves and meet everyone. We agree. Parents come in with a clipboard and lengthy list of how they expect their son to be treated. We were held hostage while they yelled at us for an hour. My AP released us but she was stuck for another hour with them. We ended up calling her over the intercom to get her out. In my first year of teaching, I was working with a kid and threw a piece of paper toward the recycling bin and missed it. I asked another girl in the room to toss it in the bin for me so that I wouldn't have to interrupt working with kid 1. Went back to work and thought nothing of it. At the end of the day, I was called to the main office. She and her mother were there demanding to the principal that I be punished for making her take out my trash. This was in the days before cell phones. I have no idea how she got there that quickly. The principal kicked her out of his office and reminded me to be careful of lunatics. As an untenured rookie, it was terrifying. Used to be a teacher biology. Meet daughter's math teacher. Daughter is talking too much in class. Her teacher reports. Okay, tell my child to be on her best behavior. A few weeks later child comes home upset. Math teacher yelling at her, picking on her, kicked her out of the classroom. Meet with math teacher again. Tell math teacher let's come up with a plan to help child achieve in your class. May I have your timeline for introducing new material and I will help ease child into it and maybe this will help. Math teacher laughs. Of course you can. From this point forward I am showing child how to do her assignments and helping her. Child comes home again upset. BC teacher told her I was showing her wrong information. Request a third meeting. Show up to meeting and have the principal, vice principal, math teacher, guidance counselor, math assistant teacher and an administrator in a conference room. WTF. Okay, teacher starts telling me how disruptive my child is. Crying, not answering questions when asked, talking with students around her and turning in work that isn't done properly. I ask, how is the work not done properly? Are her answers correct? Can she explain how she solved the problem? Teacher says yes, but isn't the way I showed her. I say it math. There are many ways to solve a problem. Forcing only one method fails to allow a child to be able to problem solve or think on their own. Your method was hard for her to visualize. I offered her different methods to figure it out. Teacher says, well, how long can you keep that up for? Math will continue to become harder and then how will you help her? At this point I now see that my child wasn't the issue. I explain I have a full year of calculus as well as a teaching degree and should have no problem helping her. 5 days later, teacher asked to have my child move to a new math teacher. At parent-teacher conference later that month there was a theme among the rest of her teachers. I wish child would speak up more. She's so quiet and a pleasure to have in class. Old math teacher isn't even coming near me. She was removed from teaching mathematics this year. Most of the other students from her class didn't do well on the state exam. Sometimes it is the teacher and not the child. You're an awesome mom. Father emailed my principal's secretary asking for a conference to discuss allowing his daughter S to skip first grade. The girl was bright but not that bright. The conference comes around. It's the mother, father, principal, and myself. My principal begins the netting by saying I understand you requested this conference to discuss S skipping a grade. The mother immediately gets this confused look on her face, turns to her husband and says what? You told me her teacher wants her to skip grades. The rest of the conference consisted of the mother and father arguing about how the father tried to pull one over on the mother. After they left my principal turned to me and said that was the worst, most awkward conference of my 15 years in education. We laughed about it and went on with our days. The next school year begins. S is in first grade where she belongs and her parents are separated. I had a parent show up in pajamas reeking of alcohol and weed. She babbled for about 5 minutes in a rather abrasive manner that I was the cause of her daughter failing my class. She then got up from her chair and walked, more or less, away without asking me a single question. I followed her out to the exit that led to the parking lot. We have a full-time police officer at the school. He happened to be coming out of the restroom at the time she was leaving, so I motioned him over and quickly explained the situation. He walked outside, and I saw him watch her pull her car out of the parking space. He walked over to her, stopped the car, and motioned her out of the car. She got out of the car and fell on the pavement. I watched him detain her, then went back into the parent conferences. She ended up being arrested for DWI and possession of crack. I had a student plagiarize a project and the parents came in to dispute it. They were both lawyers who own a local law firm together. It was a wild hour and a half. As much as I knew that I was right, it took everything in me not to just call uncle so that it would be over with. Not a teacher-parent conference per se, but after class I caught a parent and had a quick chat about her daughter. I said that she can do the work with support but when left to work independently, essentially she'd sit there doing nothing. Mum went a bit mad. Why wasn't I told about this? Me. Because you've never attended any of the 3 parent-teacher conferences we've arranged this year. Awkward silence. With a lot of parents, it's always someone else's fault besides them, or God forbid their son or daughter. I'm not sure if this one was the worst, but it stayed with me. Some parents came in whose daughter was a good student, didn't get in trouble, always did her work and was doing well in my class. Didn't expect anything difficult there, just as she's doing great. Show them some of her work, all done. But apparently I had said something to the kids along the way that if they wanted to play pro sports for a living, they needed to have a solid backup plan and some statistics about how many kids go on to play professional sports. Apparently their daughter aspired to be a professional volleyball player and they felt I had crushed her dreams. I mean, seriously, if my simply saying that offhandedly crushed her dreams, she wasn't driven enough in the first place. But who was I to say, and apparently I ruined her life altogether. That was 10 years ago and as far as I can tell, she doesn't play professional anything now. If that crushed her dreams, it's probably for the best TBH. I don't mean that in a bad way at all. A kid can pitch a fit and say their life is over and find a new interest and get over it. She could have learned the hard way, by investing years of her life in it and never achieving it. You're a good teacher. I had a student turn up to parents' evening with her older brother, about 20 years old, as her parents were busy that night. He clearly wasn't interested in her education and had turned up wearing a t-shirt that said knee deep in clunge, which was perhaps not appropriate for the occasion. Never seen that word before, but I don't have to ask what it means. I have some parents right now who constantly want to know how their angel is doing in class. They email me several times a week. This week, they were on the phone with a child during my class, taking her Chick-fil-A order so they could deliver lunch to her. This kid is not just having issues in my class, some of her other grades are much worse, and there are no consequences at home. She still has her phone, car keys, she could take the school bus, etc. This week when they emailed me, I called them out as nicely as I could. Maybe don't talk to her on the phone during class. They are more concerned with being her friend than her parents. They should have gotten a dog if they wanted to coddle something. Instead they got a human being. The parents have raised this child since birth, but they expect me to fix her issues in the daily 45 minutes I have her. Your school needs to look into Class Dojo or Power School. I can use those to see how my kid is doing without ever having to bother the teacher. A coworker of mine caught a student cheating in a test. She explained that he would get a 0 for the test and the incident would be referred to administration as a violation of the academic code at the school. The parents asked for a meeting. We've all been in this meeting, and it goes one of two ways. Either a song-faced parent is asking specific questions about what exactly their child did in order to determine the number of months they would be grounded. If the parent spends the meeting insisting that their child could never ever do something like that, to my co-worker's surprise, the meeting consisted of the parents conceding that their child did in fact cheat, but that there was nothing, 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 but that there was nothing. I work in higher ed, as in, where adults go to school. Student meets several times with advisor to get classes planned out. All student has to do is to online and sign up for the exact classes on the list. Student, for some reason, decides not to sign up for a required class. This happens 2 years in a row, despite the advisor going out of their way to remind them that it's required. Student is now a senior in their last semester. Their application for graduation is denied as they didn't take the required class. They'll have to come back next year for a single class. Student calls mommy and daddy, who schedule a meeting with the dean. Dean tells mommy and daddy that their kid is an adult, was repeatedly told to take the class, ignore the advisors, and it's basically student's own fault. Parents get mad, start saying things like it's not kid's fault, you never told her it was required. Dean pulls out class list signed by both advisor and student from every meeting they had, which shows a required class labeled as required. Parents literally crumble up the papers in front of the dean, asks what dean is going to do to fix this. Dean calls an advisor. Parents look smug. Dean then tells advisor to sit down with the kid and make sure they register for the class next semester. Parents not happy. Dean reminds parents that student is adult and parents have zero say in higher ed. Parents get a reality check. Student graduated next year. I had to call a meeting with a parent after I received a picture message from her phone the night before. The picture was a dong pic, which featured a tattoo of Pinocchio with the dong as the nose. I used to teach the first formal year of school. One parent sat next to his wife to discuss his 5-year-old daughter's start to her schooling career, and stared blatantly at my chest the entire time. Not even subtle, and I was not wearing a revealing top. It was very uncomfortable. Friend of mine had 2 girls in her class who were BESR friends, but their mums didn't get on, so they were never allowed to see each other outside of school. Sure enough, parents' evening comes round. She sees the parents of girl 1. Little bit later the parents of girl 2 arrive. Same dad. The poor girls had no clue they were half sisters as far as my friend knows. I had a parent of a failing student tell me that, since my class average was a 78, I was failing my students in my teaching, and she wanted to know what I was going to do as a teacher to improve my instruction. I almost laughed at her. I told her that if my class average was a 78, then close to half the class had a B or higher. Sorry that little Timmy is failing because he doesn't do anything, but geez, maybe I challenged them more. It wasn't a parent conference, but at my first teaching gig, one of my problematic students was at it again. being disruptive and all that jazz. So my assistant, I was the head band director, who was teaching the class, brought her into my office and very aggressively told me to call her parents. Before I did that, I wanted to assess what was going on, since I was doing some paperwork grade submissions. After hearing her side and writing it all in a journal, I told her that I was going to call her parents and tell them what you told me and why you were brought into my office. After I told her that, she got all fussy and stated something along the lines of, "I am grown. I don't care what you do. I can handle myself. All your teachers hate me for no reason." This girl was like 11. I called her mother and explained the situation. She then proceeded to berate me, saying it's my fault that her daughter is getting into trouble and that if she had a car she would be up at the school and in me and my assistant's face causing a scene. I tried to calm her down but she wasn't having it, saying it's all my fault and that she is tired of us getting her daughter into trouble. After the call was over, I immediately told my principal about the situation and he told me it would be okay. But I'm not gonna lie, that call made me so sick to my stomach that I couldn't eat lunch or any food until I got home late at night. It wasn't an official parent-teacher conference. I had requested to switch divisions from middle school to high school. I didn't know the high school principal very well but his son was in my class. He comes in during one of my prep period to tell me that the test I gave his son was terribly written and unfairly graded. Then he said, "I know you've requested to transfer to high school. Let me tell you, this quality of teaching would never be tolerated there." The worst conference I have is the one where the parents think you're a bad teacher if their kid doesn't have an A. I have 180 students and teach a hard class, but if I don't have a guaranteed checklist for their kid to get an A, then I get harassed and demeaned all year long. I'm not a teacher, but the worst parent-teacher I attended was 2 years ago, when a mother was so furious and acting so stupid just because she didn't like the idea that the 4th graders will be having sex education, but it's a must, it's on the curriculum. She's so concerned and afraid that when her son came home from school and will ask her what is threesome. But sex education for 4th graders is actually about changes in their body. We tried our best explaining to her that it doesn't mean that our children will have sex automatically. But still she was shouting and accusing us that we were all stupid parents and we don't think of our children's future. But the most puzzling for me is actually she already has a 16-year-old son, who already had sex ed in the 4th grade and a sex ed in the 7th class. This isn't exactly a formal parent-teacher conference, but it makes every conference I will ever have from now on significantly better in comparison. I briefly worked in another country where it is common for everyone to visit saunas. Occasionally, the parents of my students would want to have a conference about their kids, while we were all nude. Often their kids were with them, but they were littles, so that part wasn't so weird. The part that made me shut it down is that they were looking everywhere except my eyeballs during the discussion. So I would just tell them it was time for me to go and they could make an appointment to see me at the school building. Now anytime I'm having a hard time during a conference, I remind myself that at least everyone in the room is clothed. Not a teacher but a student. My teacher told me she was once threatened by the child that the child's parents are gonna come and beat her up if comments aren't good. For example, she tells them the child slacks off. It was true. Parents show up, the father a big tattooed mobster. The parents ended up arguing the whole time. Yeah, my teacher was so glad when that interview was over. The dad came in stinking of weed and red-eyed, obviously stoned. Could hold a conversation. The son was just shriveled up in the chair next to him and I could tell how ashamed and embarrassed this poor kid was. I am not a teacher but was a student. It was my conference. My teacher called my parents in for a conference because I had gotten into a fight and hurt another student. That student was bullying me. Well, actually everyone bullied me. I had no friends and learned to fend for myself. I had gotten in fights before but had never gotten caught. And, so basically, he called me some names. I called him worse. Something I shouldn't be saying at 7 years old, and decided to fight a girl. He started the fight but I didn't hurt him too much since I was stopped before I could give him a black eye. But my teacher told my parents that they needed to explain to me that I couldn't be so violent and stuff. My dad told the teacher off about how completely worthless they were. They all knew about the bullying, just didn't give two crap to do anything. and how I have every right to defend myself with violence if the teachers wouldn't do a dang thing to help me when I'm being attacked by other students, and that I shouldn't be in trouble for self-defense. Of course, there were a lot more curse words in that, and we were just sitting there listening to my dad curse out the teacher and the other kid's parent and then practically dragging me out of the room. When we got to the car, my dad told me that I did nothing wrong, that I was right, and that next time I needed to break the kid's freaking arm off, and then bought me some ice cream and a new toy. It's a toss-up of the time a parent described their child's bowel movements in vivid detail, didn't seem to bother the child, or the time a parent screamed bloody murder at us for not saying her child was perfect. I'm a teacher, but this story actually comes from a colleague of mine. A couple of years back, the classroom teacher, principal, and special education team met with the parents of a 6th grader to discuss putting him on an IEP, individualized education plan. At the beginning of the meeting, it's customary to ask the parents about their concerns about their child. The mother proceeded to pull up a photo on her phone and express concern over a rash on her son's privates. The father, on the other hand, wanted the team to tell his wife that it was time she stopped giving their son a bath. I don't know if the kid was ever put on an IEP. I actually think parent-teacher communication and consistency is key to a child's educational success. I enjoy parent-teacher conferences, even the hard ones, because I get to know that I've done my part to make sure parents are on board with what's going on for their child and what I believe they need. There are parents who don't give a frick, and that's hard, but not my fault. At least I can know I did my bit. The worst parent-teacher conferences I've had have got to be the ones where they don't show up. They usually have the kids that would benefit the most from the parent-teacher teamwork, guidance, support, and that's not a coincidence. An obese mother pulled out her boob in mid-conversation to try and attach a 3-4-year-old. Once the kid didn't take, she said, must not be hungry." We had 2 moms fight at our school last year. Their kids had fought each other that week and mom came in to finish the deed. My father worked at a school and said a mother showed up once with Vaseline on her face because she was looking for a fist fight. Had a family of white, racist trailer trash parents who had a son with an emotional disturbance accuse us of discrimination in entire meeting and refused to accept that their son couldn't even read or write, but ignored and didn't want to talk about the fact that he had stabbed me and tried to hang himself, and our resource officer had to. I've been a teacher for 19 years now, and I just witnessed the worst one I've ever seen. The kid is a terror, a nightmare in class, actually a bright kid, but there are hints and rumors about some trauma in his past that, of course, the people who teach him can't know about. Still, he's horrible in class. Legal guardian is his aunt. I have no idea where mom and dad are, but we have the parent-teacher conference and aunt shows up, doesn't speak a word of English. Some Asian language, I'm not sure which, but there's an interpreter there who is helping. We start talking with the aunt about the kid. She gets upset, but we're talking about how the kid has terrible grades because he won't do anything at all. We talk about his behavior and his refusal to do anything he's asked by anyone, teacher or principal or sometimes our school police officer. She tells us that he gets home so late from school every day because of football practice that he doesn't have time for homework. Except he wasn't on the football team. We don't know where he's going, but we know he's not getting home until 6 or 7 at night. We offered after school services to try to get him caught up, but she says their car is broken down so they can't pick him up and it's an hour-long walk to their apartment. I just watched her face as it went on and on. Finally she just apologized to us all. It was really heartbreaking. I know it doesn't sound that bad, and no one got punched or sued. But to see her go through all this was awful. She was so embarrassed and you could tell that she was completely hopeless. She clearly knew that it was beyond her, and that there was nothing she could do to help. It was painful to watch. I taught middle school. One of my students' parents were going through a divorce. The new stepmom, who was the girlfriend, scheduled the meeting and didn't tell mom. The entire meeting the dad and new girlfriend bash mom. She's mean. She's not affectionate. She barely speaks English. Her family life growing up was rough, so she comes from trash. They are saying all of this in front of the student. I kept steering the conversation by saying things like, so Student turned in a lovely project recently. The girlfriend would say things like, "Oh, really, that is surprising. Because student has terrible ADHD because mom smoked weed when she was pregnant." Well, the next week the mom schedules a meeting since she was left out of the first one. I expected this terrible person. She was totally pleasant, interested, and involved, asking relevant questions about her kid. Her kid sat with us and lit up. I was surprised. On her way out she told the student to run ahead, and she whispered to me, "Yeah, I smoked some pot when I was pregnant." But who wouldn't, being married to that cheating butthole? I learned to email them on separate email chains from then on. Not a teacher, in advance. A student's dad called the principal every racial slur in the book, casually, I might add, made monkey noises, and got kicked out of the conference. The kid bragged about it the next day. He was in the office for fights and calling female teachers all kinds of sexual terms BTW. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.